Yes, we are, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Kavanaugh. I'm going to call the meeting to order Wednesday, September 13th, 2023 at 5 p.m. Tonight is a workshop. It's a workshop on charter amendments. Now that the meeting's called to order, I'd remind all my colleagues to please speak in the microphone, mute when you're not muting. And Mr. Kavanaugh, could you call the roll of the City Commission and executive staff?
Commissioner Wasserman.
Here.
Commissioner Brody.
Here.
Commissioner Raley.
Here.
Vice Mayor Welch.
Here.
Mayor Rydell.
Here.
City Manager Brooks.
Here.
City Attorney Piper.
Here.
Okay. We're here this evening on the workshop item. There was some discussion at a previous City Commission meeting to talk about these two items that we have before us. I believe, I hope, let me just see by a show of hands, has everyone independently met with the city attorney? All of us? Is that a yes? Okay. So I guess, to streamline at least a preliminary discussion, I understand that we can discuss more things, but just in general, before we get there, I said this in my meeting with the city attorney in regarding the two issues of having an elected mayor and or having elections in November versus March. I suggested, I think it's the cleaner way to do things. We kind of just do a quick poll. If you're in favor, if you're not, and if you don't know, you don't know. And that's all good. Now, I don't think anything is not saying whether you support the idea or you don't support the idea. This is if you support the idea of a referendum item being placed on a ballot. So we're not talking whether you may love a mayor, you may hate it, you may love a November election, you may hate it, but this is about, do you support a referendum item for the residents to decide the issue? So I'm just going to go down the line real quick. I just think that gives us a starting point for discussion, because hypothetically, if everyone says we don't want to change anything, these ladies did a lot of work for no reason. Hypothetically, if everyone says let's do both, then it begets a presentation and a conversation. So I want to at least give a starting point to that for that. So Commissioner Wasserman.
I am for the mayor on the ballot, but not November.
Brody.
I want the voters to decide, so I think both need to go to the voters.
Commissioner Raley.
I feel an appointed mayor, and I'm undecided about March, November.
Vice Mayor.
Okay. I am, my primary objective in the original discussions was what I heard from the voters, and that was to take the elections to November. I didn't hear any discussion from the voters about an elected mayor.
Okay, I'm a fan of tonight letting the voters decide. I'm up obviously for discussing both issues. I think the voters should be able to decide both issues, good, bad, or indifferent. So did anyone pull that? I didn't.
So what I gathered, good evening.
Good evening.
Terrell Pyburn, City Attorney for the record, here with Eve Lewis, Assistant City Attorney. Good evening. Oh, what I gathered from the poll that was just taken is that we have 3 commissioners that seem to be in favor of at least discussing and putting it possibly to the voters for an elected mayor, and 3, possibly 4, that may be in favor of putting before the voters the issue of the November election. Therefore, since we do seem to have a majority in favor of at least discussing and possibly putting in front of the voters both of the issues, we will proceed. I do want to say that at the meeting of April 27th, as Mayor Rydell stated earlier, you all did give direction for us to look at the issues of moving the elections to November and looking at the possibilities of providing for an elected mayor. There are many variables involved in doing both. There seem to be more variables involved in moving to an elected mayor, though, based on the fact that we do have districts here in the city of Coconut Creek. Now that you have stated that you'd like to move forward to discuss both, I will be turning it over in part to Ms. Lewis to discuss the various options. We do have a chart up on the screen that you should have all gotten a copy of in advance. In addition to that, you do have sample ballot questions before you on this screen that if you would like, we can go through those as well. We do have this additional screen only because we cannot toggle. We can't put 2 different items on these 2 larger screens. Otherwise, we did provide some sample language to you. I don't think we'll quite get into the level of the weeds with that until possibly later. But if you have any questions at any time, let us know. if otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Lewis to just go over the different options, which include the status quo, single objective of either elected mayor or November election, and dual objective of both elected mayor and November elections. Go ahead, Ms. Lewis.
Thank you. And since I didn't have access to the laptop at the table, I just got up and I'll speak from the lectern while we go through, the drop down menu of these each of these options. So just a quick shout out. I just wanted to say thank you to the city clerk's department, obviously Terrell as well, the city attorney's department, and in our community relations department, Martin Pino, he helped us create this dashboard, so to speak, so that it's easier to walk through all these options. So it takes a village. So option A, so what we've parsed these options out in a manner that you can sort of choose your own ending. So single option or single objective is carved out in the first sort of 3 tiles, option A, option B, and option B1. So the single objective that's achieved by option A is an elected mayor. We would keep our elections in March. The single objective that's achieved in option B is moving the March elections to November. And option B1 is the same thing, moving from March to November, but on a different timeline. Now, as we progress into the dual objective tiles, you'll see option C is actually accomplishing both the elected mayor and the move to November, as well as option D does the dual objective as well. It's both the elected mayor and the move to November. It's just different timelines. So just to be brief, I don't know if everybody can see this. We tried our best to fit all of the tiles on the screen in a manner that you can read the language and the text. But so this
If I could really quickly, can everybody see it either on the screen in front of you or on your papers or on the large screen? Yes? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And so basically it tracks our ballot language. So I'll just go over that. So change to elected mayor and 4 district commissioners instead of 5 district commissioners. Should the city charter be amended to modify the composition on the city commission from 5 district commissioners to 4 district commissioners and an elected mayor? This change will require modifying the city's district map, so redistricting, at the March 9th, 2027 municipal election. All elected offices will be on the ballot and the terms of the office will be staggered thereafter. So in order to achieve this option, there would be what's called, I've commonly referred to as a lineup on the ballot in order to start the term stagger. So in designing these options, we wanted to make sure that we kept as much stability within our charter for the norms that we've already established by the voters and by, the city's customs. So what we would do is we would keep the 4-year terms, but we would have to start out with 2 initially and then 2 and 4 to start the stagger. Now, the unique thing about this is you would have to 90 days before the municipal election in March, would have a process by which our city clerk would at a public meeting draw straws or draw lots, and the mayor would automatically have a 4-year term, and the 2 districts that were drawn by our city clerk in that, by chance drawing would also get the 4-year term. The 2 straws not drawn, those districts would have the 2-year term. So as you can see, we would cancel the 2025 election. We would move everyone to the lineup in 2027, and then it would start the stagger for 2 years and 4 years. Is there I could stop at each one for questions or just keep running straight through, just in the interest of time.
Keep going.
Okay. So option B.
I'll let you present, Eve, and then I'm going to turn it over to the commission for discussion.
Okay, great. And so I can go very quickly. Basically, option B is what you have here is I call it just a little bit of a leap. So you have the objective is to get from March to November. So we take our 25 districts that are ending their terms in March of 2025, and we move them to November of 26. We take the districts that are ending in March of 27, we move them to November of 28. So that's literally what's being achieved there. And then so going on to B1, Essentially, the same thing is happening, except instead of extending the terms to get us to the even numbered November years, what we would do is at the March 25 election, those candidates running for those districts would actually recognize that for that term, it would be a unique timeframe. Instead of 4 years, which is their norm, they would have to accept the 3 years and 8 months to get them over to their first November election. So that would be in 28. So they would realize a little bit of a shortage of their 4-year term. But once again, no one's been elected for that term. It would be something that they go into it knowing that their term would instead be 3 years and 8 months rather than 4 years. So same thing. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I should jump to the ballot question as well.
And can I just add something really quickly?
Sure.
I did want to mention that all of these examples or scenarios that we put before you presuppose that nobody's existing term that you were elected for by the electors, nobody's existing term is going to be shortened. So all of this pertains to future terms of commissioners because we cannot change your existing terms.
And since B1 came to us in more of our discussions and brainstorming, we actually don't have ballot language that ties directly to option B1, but we did give you sample language for what option B would look like. And it basically states, move municipal elections from March in odd numbered years to November in even numbered years. Should the city charter be amended to move all municipal elections from March on odd numbered years to the general election dates in November on even numbered years? ? This change will authorize the terms of office ending in March 25 to be extended to November 26 and those ending in March 27 to be extended to November 28. So that's what I explained, in option B. So moving right along into our dual objectives. If you don't mind, Terrell, can you scroll? I'll open the discussion with the ballot language. So option C, what we've titled it as is elected mayor / November elections, all candidates on the ballot in March of 27. I call this the March of 2027 lineup. So basically what this does is this takes the scenario that we talked about in option A and where everybody lines up in March of 2027. But instead of doing the 2 and the 4 stagger, we are also trying to achieve a leap to get us to the November elections. So it's going to be not as clean as an even 4 and an even 2. What we're doing here is we're making it instead of 4, it would be 5.6 years, which is 5 years and 8 months. And then the 2-year in the option A scenario would be 3 years and 8 months. So that gets us full over the hurdle of the even numbered years. And then 2 seats would be up for reelection in 2030. Terrell, do you mind scrolling down? Sorry. Okay, so the new composition of the commission for vote. So that's what the title is limited to 15 words. So we tried to scrunch it in there. New composition of commission for vote in March of 27 with staggered terms in November 2030. Should the city charter be amended to modify the composition of the city commission from 5 district commissioners to 4 district commissioners and an elected mayor, and move all the municipal elections to November general elections starting in November 2030? Because remember, the lineup is in March 2027. In March 2027, all elected offices will be on the ballot, and the terms of office will be adjusted to provide for staggered 4-year terms starting in November 2030. So just to break that down a little bit more, basically, it'll track what option A provided for. We would cancel the March 2025 election. We would bring everyone on the ballot in March of 2027. And then we would stretch the terms through interim ordinances as authorized through a charter change in 2024. If this were to go before the voters and be approved, we would basically stretch those terms to get us to the lineup in March of 2027, and then provide for the uneven terms to get us to the next November election. So it would not be November of 2028 because that'd be illogical. We're doing this in 2027. We wouldn't want to run again, bring another election before the voters in 2028, only a year later. So we wanted to make it more logical in the 2030 next general election. So that in a nutshell is option C. So moving on to option D. Essentially, this is achieving both objectives. It's just a different timeline. So this is the new composition of commission for vote in November 2028 with new staggered terms. Should the city charter be amended to modify the composition of the city commission from 5 district commissioners to 4 districts and an elected mayor, and move the municipal election to November general election starting in November 2028? The current terms would be extended and future terms shortened to provide that all offices will be on the November 2028 general election ballot and staggered terms will commence thereafter. So what's unique about option D is that we would still hold the March 2025 election. That term would be shortened to 3 years and 8 months to get us to November 2028. And then the lineup, like I've described, would happen in November of 2028. And then the cleaner cut staggered would occur with the 2-year and the 4-year with the drawing of lots by our city clerk 90 days prior to that election. So I know I've thrown a lot of information at you and Terrell wants to say something, so I'll pass it over.
Thank you. I also, before you go into your discussion, I wanted to point out just a couple other variables. Part of why none of this would really occur until March of 2027 at the earliest, especially at least as it relates to the elected mayor, is because we do have districts and we would have to provide for redistricting in order to have the elected mayor. And right now, our charter provides for redistricting to occur in 2026. So generally speaking, any changes to the districts, we would be able to follow our charter and engage in the redistricting in 2026 as planned, unless you direct us otherwise, in which case we'll have to have a further charter amendment. Additionally, there are requirements under state law that any elections not take place within 270 days of redistricting. And then we also in our charter provide that the redistricting board would meet at least 120 days or for at least 120 days. Beyond that, I did want to point out that Eve went over the different staggering and the terms and how they would be impacted by the different options. And the way that we have drafted these options takes into account that the term limits would essentially start over. So I wanted you to be aware of that. And Eve has done a lot of research. We shared some information with you regarding other cities, which ones have March elections, which ones have November elections. And generally speaking, it looks like 8 cities and us have March elections. 18 cities seem to have elected mayors. Us, as well as one other city, has an appointed mayor, and one has a strong mayor, and it looks like 2 select their mayor based on the highest number of votes. We tried to keep our scenarios as true to our existing charter as possible and simply address your initial question of, okay, what would it look like to get us to the from March to November elections, and what would it look like if we were to move to an elected mayor scenario? Certainly, if you want to change other variables, we could not possibly contemplate everything, so that may not be reflected on the chart or in what we provided to you today, but certainly you can discuss that.
And I only wanted to add that our paralegal Kathleen Hiddle was a wonderful resource and supporter for us in gathering all of this research. So it was a huge team effort.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I guess we'll just some thoughts and discussion. We'll start with Commissioner Mossman.
The reason why I said one of the two is I think it's a lot all at once. And I think if we're going to move forward and change the charter, I don't feel, I mean, listen, I could be swayed in our discussion and talking, and I'm not like, rooted in my opinion, but I do think it's a lot. It's a lot to throw at voters all at once. I understand they're 2 hot topics and they did come up in the election in March. And but the legislator, I know they were floating around whether they're going to move all municipals to November or not. So that's an interesting piece. It didn't go further in the legislator, but I know it was brought up. But I just think throwing everything at once is it's a lot for people. And I think when we go to the ballots in November 24, it's a huge election. It's a presidential election. People are going to get to the ballot. And it's a lot to read. It's a lot to comprehend. We're changing 2 parts of the charter. That's kind of where I'm at. I could certainly see, why a November election is good. It gives convenience to a lot of people. But I do think it can, and I think former Commissioner Tooley brought this point up back in February and March, is that, it would be at the bottom of the ballot. People might have ballot fatigue. People might not take our votes, seriously. When in March, people are a little more, they're genuine about it. They are going because they are informed, they're knowledgeable, and they want to participate. And that's something I've thought about. In terms of the elected mayor, it's not a strong mayor. So to me, it's moot. I could go either way, but I do support giving the people the choice of choosing if they want to choose their mayor or not. If it was a strong mayor, I'd be opposed. But because it's basically the same ceremonial type of mayor, giving the people the choice for it, I think is appropriate at this time.
Commissioner Brody.
So I'm usually not one to not have words, but to be honest with you, there's a lot of stuff here. I think having the mayor elected brings a lot of stability to the city. I think when businesses look, they want to know who they're dealing with and what the face of that city is. So I think that it's important that we elect the mayor, and that's a steady position. So I'm all for that piece of it. Where I get a little bit on the fence is with moving it to November, and I'm kind of in agreement with Commissioner Wasserman on, you kind of get lost in the mud of it. But I'm going to tell you, I am a believer in the system, and I believe that the 60,000 residents, the 38,000 voters need to voice their opinion on what they want, regardless of how I feel about it. Last year when I got appointed, we saw the splashback from appointments, and we rectified that. I think after this election, we saw the splashback of low voter turnout and all the comments that were made online and all the people voicing their opinions. And to be honest with you, they got to have their voice. And this is what our system is made of, is the people having a voice, and that vote is their voice. So regardless of how I feel about either one of these things, it needs to go to our residents for them to voice their opinion, to make the decisions about a mayor and about the date of the election, regardless of how I feel about it. That is my opinion. I'm very strongly into let them vote and let them speak.
I guess I failed to ask Commissioner Wasserman to go back to you. Is there any option or detail item that you want to address as well yet, or no? Okay. Commissioner Riley?
Well, there was.
Oh, I apologize, Commissioner Brody. Brody, is there like an option?
There's a caveat to the mayor and excuse me, sorry. To the mayor and the redistricting. And I'm just going to throw this out there and let everybody come mull it over. But I think the city has grown in such a way, and we've seen over the last election, that the importance of the districts aren't as important as they were when we established the city. And I'm just want to throw it out there is what does everybody feel about just eliminating the district in itself? And that where it's a seat 1, 2, 3, and 4. And it's already an at-large vote anyways, but why not let it be an at-large seat rather than a districting? So just a thought for everybody.
Commissioner Riley.
Okay. I'm all for the people having a voice. Absolutely. And they do have a voice when they elect each commissioner. So every one of us on this dais was elected by the people. What worries me is that any one district could have the power of the election at any one for a very long time. 4 years to have a seated mayor is a very long time. And to have the mayor being elected at large in the city without having, and it could very well be without having any experience on the commission, could be a very unsettling situation at best. That's how I feel about an elected mayor. But every one of us were elected by the people. So the people do have a voice. We wouldn't be here if they didn't. As far as March or November, of course, fiscally, it makes more sense to do it in November with the other elections. But again, people, by the time they get to the municipality election, they're already burnt out. And half of them probably don't even know who we are. So it could get lost in the weeds. So I'm torn with that. But as far as an elected mayor, I still support my original decision.
Is there anything in terms of, Jackie, any of the options that strike you or bother you or?
That
Any-
I know
feedback?
any way we go with changing the elections, the date of the elections is going to be a painful transition for some, because it's going to lengthen the term, it's going to shorten the term. It's going to be convoluted until we get to that 2030 mark, right? And then we even out, and then we're on a normal routine basis of right now. I have no other option.
Understood. Vice Mayor Welch.
Okay, thank you. First, I'd like to direct my comment to Commissioner Brody about opening up the districts to make them all at large. I hasten to use the example of Plantation. I believe they have 4 that live almost in the same neighborhood. And that scenario could very likely happen here. I mean, I get the gist of it, and in theory, it sounds like it makes sense. And but when you talk about an example like that, it kind of resurrects you back to keeping it by district. I just wanted to let you know that I had entertained that thought myself and realized for me, that wouldn't be a forward movement for us to present to the voters. I already stated that I feel the voters that I spoke to are very interested in us changing the elections to November. I mean, you go knock on the door, you call them, and they say, "Why are you here?" We have an election in November, and heretofore we never had the impetus either by the Charter Review Board or by us on the board to move something like that forward. So I think it is a time for us now, no matter how we feel about it, to put that on the ballot for the voters to decide. And it honestly gets us to the November election quicker by taking the option B.
Could you click it down, Terrell, please? Just for
Um,
people in the audience. Thank you.
if that is the intent of putting it on the ballot, going to the expense and the time and the trouble to craft all this knowledge and use all that investigative effort that all these legal eagles have done on our behalf at our request. So I think it takes into account some fiscal responsibility on our part too, because not that we should look at the numbers that it costs, but if we did, it's the least fiscal impact to our voters if we go with option B, and still gets us to the best resolution. I mean, if it's the will of the consensus of the commission to go to put the mayor on the ballot, I personally don't feel that there is a need to do that. But if that's the consensus of the commission, obviously, then I feel like option D had the more equitable about the actual odd terms of each of us, or each of our seats, if you will, to me. And I think we need to think not just of us as representing the seat, whatever that might look like if it were an elected mayor in 4 districts. But I think we should look at whoever might be filling that seat and making it as equitable in terms as possible. And to me, that filled the bill. D. So those are my thoughts.
Okay, I guess, I mean, I think what is striking in the last handouts that were handed out for November and March elections is the one, I think there's only 3 cities out of 31 that still don't have an elected mayor. I think when you're in a more of a modern society, I think not having an elected mayor or the people deciding it doesn't benefit the city. And I understand there's a component of a ceremonial title. I understand that there's a component, especially in a manager commission form of government. But I mean, listen, to this day, I may have the title right now, but I meet people every day playing basketball and things like that. And I'm just going to say, we have 3 former commissioners here. Becky's identified traditionally as the mayor of Coconut Creek. You can talk to almost anybody in the county. It's a fact, regardless. And I know Mickey's here and I know Lisa's here, but there's this connotation. I can't tell you why or how, but Becky, it is. I think you'd agree with it. You don't have to say anything, but I think that it's still to this day. So I think there's a component there. You guys said something to me interesting that I dove into, which was the former rotating mayor seat in other cities in the past decade that have since changed, which was Cooper City, Pembroke Pines in the past decade. So I actually called those elected officials and I was like, tell me your thoughts on this. And that actually bolstered, because originally my knee-jerk reaction was like, let the voters decide both. I think we have to. I think what Commissioner Brody said is salient and correct. You got to let people decide. And then what Jackie says is kind of right as well. We don't let them decide ordinances and rules, and there's something we decided as well. That's why people vote for us. I do believe the city's large enough. I think the city is in a place of a business world, new business is coming, that there's a benefit to having an elected mayor whenever that comes into effect. John, well, it makes sense now because the ladies brought up to me the district thing, like getting rid of districts. Now I know where it came from. So I appreciate you keeping that under your vest, but I get where that came from. And I don't think the city's in a place, candidly speaking clear, that Winmore doesn't control a chunk of votes to be able to do that yet. Do I think down the road that happens? I do. I think that the recent election trends, and I went and analyzed that. I mean, I would actually be supportive of no districts, but because I trust voters. But then I go in my mind, and I'm not saying this happens, or like Jackie says, here's a slate, and you run with it in Winmore, which not bringing up old wounds is a harder community to campaign in and things like that for some, maybe not all. I'm not trying to go there, but I think that the no district thing, I'm not there yet. I do like the component in Sandy. I didn't know that. So you tell me all the plantation council members live in the same neighborhood?
Well, there are a number of them, and that's not a really healthy situation. And I do want to say one thing, though, Mayor, when you're talking, I look at the model of the county, and our county, unlike some of our other surrounding counties, has a rotating mayor, and it truly is rotational. And honestly, when they come, like when Lamar came, the breadth that each one of them can bring in the diversity of their drives and their passions and their background really adds to the flavor of the entire commission. So each 9 of them get an opportunity to fully share on their basis for 1 year what they offer to the entire county, not just the district in which they were voted. And I really think that our city stands out in that we can have the opportunity to do the same. Each chair, each district has a representative, not just here, but prior to, some of those sitting out in the audience, that brought their own flavors and their own experience and their own backgrounds, and really flourished the city with that opportunity to see it and get a chance to showcase it. So that's just my thought.
Let me give you the other side of that coin. The other side of that coin, you could be Joanne Simone and Margate that sat on the commission for over a decade and due to politics has never been elected.
Because they don't rotate.
They do rotate.
No, they don't.
Just don't rotate to her.
They don't truly rotate. if they truly
But
rotated.
this has happened. I mean, this city hasn't truly rotated.
Oh, I can agree to that.
I know you personally can agree to it. I can agree to it. And the three ladies that are out in the audience could 100% agree to it. So by not having an elected mayor, it makes it politics amongst the commission and makes the city manager involved politically with the seating of a mayor historically. So I think there's the other side of the coin clearly outweighs some of the other, and that's the intrinsic things. I agree with you that every person brings a different dynamic. And I think you have it at the county, but the same thing at the county is true. There's members of that county commission that have never been and won't be mayor because it's not a true rotation. If it was a true rotation, much like Fort Lauderdale does with their vice mayor, that's a different story. So I mean, that's what another reason that I'm supportive of it, but more is interesting to me is I'm not, and I'll say this just in regard to these models. And I think you can debate these points back and forth. Jeff, let me just say one thing. I'm not a fan of extending anyone's terms. I don't think that is not to me the will of the voter. So I'm not a fan. I'm a fan of elongating out. I'm be very clear with that. I don't think any of us should be extending our terms that significant. If there's a short change, hell, if this goes, I'll take a short change term. If it's one of us selecting it. Going to 3 years and 8 months is a lot different than extending a term from March of 25 to November of 26. Like that's not the will of the people to me at all. So that's not a model I would support.
Shortening isn't either.
Well, okay, that's your prerogative. I mean, if you don't support it, and that's fine. But I don't see elongating a term as doing it, or you do it where you bring it up naturally years down the road and you draw straws for a random 2-year term for two people and then the other 4-year terms. So and then thereafter. So I'm just telling you that's my opinion in regarding the staggering question. So Commissioner Wasserman.
Thank you. A couple things. I was here in March, for when we had the mayor vote, and it was my first time sitting up here, and to feel the tension amongst us, it was real. I do think it caused, and I think all wounds are healed, but it did cause some problems, I think internally with feelings and people's relationships. So that's one of the reasons I would be okay with, giving it the people the opportunity to choose what they wanted to do. But have we considered doing the mayor every 2 years? Why is it that we're going to create a new position and now it's going to be a 4-year, and then the commissioner seats, which are positions that we've had since we've had the charter, are every, going to be on a short list, a short lot, pulling straws and whatever that is. Have we thought about maybe doing, if we do go to an elected, I mean, right now the mayor has the ability to seat 2 years, right? Which Mayor Rydell is doing. So why wouldn't we just have, if we were to go down this route, was it thought about to maybe have the mayor do 2 years, and kind of now all of a sudden the commission has a little more stability, and now the mayor is every 2 years. What was the background behind that, if there was?
Well, certainly we did contemplate all the possibilities. I think to start the stagger, you could look at the Margate model, and they did do the stagger with the 2-year term of the mayor, and they layered it in so that it will be fully realized in, they don't actually start their elected mayor until 2028. And I think our thought process was to start this process as soon as possible. And that being, I understood it to be the direction of the city commission to go with the last of the vested terms, which would be March of 2027. So that was what option C generally represents. But certainly when we went back and brainstormed the 2 years, there was something about how we had to organize it, that one of the seats was going to be materially outcasted in terms of the cycle. So whoever wanted to take a turn at being the 2-year mayor had to either compromise their 4-year vested term and resign and then jump into the 2 years in order to be part of that, stagger. But certainly I can go back to the drawing board and look further at it. It looks like there are only a handful of cities that do the 2 years.
And they're the cities that neighbor us, Margate and Coral Springs.
Wasn't Parkland? I didn't look, but I thought Rich was a 2-year mayor.
I saw Coral Springs has a 2-year and Margate, and there was a couple they weren't neighboring us, but I saw the two that neighbor us.
Actually, it does appear that Wilton Manors is one of them as well.
Right.
So what you'll find in these charts and in the research, every city does it so
Yeah.
differently.
Yeah.
And the staggers are so different to the point of elongating terms. There's several of these who have elongated terms up to 6 years. So that is
Oy.
an acceptable norm in terms of creating the changes that you're seeking.
Okay. You corrected me on that. That to me, that was just something that jumped out.
And in terms of a 2-year mayor, you're actually, for some reason, the word mayor attracts people, right? But if you have a 2-year mayor now, potentially you're going to draw some attention to our commission elections, because now basically every election we have is the mayor role will be included in it, or the mayor, a mayor title. So that could draw a little more interest and excitement into our elections, rather than just having, all right, the year that there's the mayor and the 2 short lots, long lots, whatever that is, and then you have a 2 commissioner election. For some reason, there's going to be a little more attention maybe on that mayor one, which could then disenfranchise the one with 2, because there's a little more interest in that mayor one. Does that make sense?
It does. May I add something though? If you go to a 2-year mayor, as Ms. Lewis pointed out, not only may you run into a possible conflict where you have a situation where you have a sitting commissioner that may decide, even though they have 2 years left on their term, they want to go ahead and, because, they're elected for 4 years, they want to go ahead and run for mayor. But then you end up having to put that other seat on the ballot, which may not necessarily be up. I had a point here.
Right. So you're filling vacancies that are unnecessarily created by the desire to earlier terminate your term.
So-
we tried to keep it as seamless as it exists right now, which is the 4-year
Right.
standard. But
So why not add it as a this is obviously, we're just going right around, but why not add it to where if you're a city commissioner, you can only run for mayor in the year you would potentially run for reelection for your commission seat?
well, we couldn't limit an eligibility on that basis, because if it were you, you'd be materially harmed by not being eligible to run for a representative capacity, for some type of seat for which the people may want you to run that year.
That's
So-
the risk you as an individual would take.
We'll have to research whether or not that's a eligibility criteria that's legally acceptable. What the point I was simply trying to make is that if somebody resigns their seat in order to become mayor, they can't then say, if perhaps they lose that election, oh, now I want my seat back. I mean, that's it. You've resigned. If you weren't elected as mayor, well, you've forfeited the other 2 years of your term.
Right. But in the next rotation of that seat, they could run for it again, right?
Presumably correct.
Okay. Because when we're doing this, we're getting so deep down in the weeds, and haste makes waste. And Eve, you brought up the words, you wanted to get I don't know what you said, it was basically get it done as soon as possible. And I'm against that. I think if we're going to mess with any sort of charter or any sort of people's lives that govern them, we don't just rush into something. And I do think this meeting came up kind of fast. But that's my view. It's, now all of a sudden we have few options to choose from. And I feel limited in a sense, to be honest, because here we are, and I don't want to rush it. I think haste makes waste. But I've talked a lot.
So Commissioner Wasserman, just to address that point, I don't think anyone wants to do anything hasty up here, but this is a workshop. The goal of this workshop is to give our city attorney's office direction that will generate language that must come before us on a commission agenda. So then when on a commission agenda, I'm sure, I know Lisa because she texted me, but I'm sure Mickey and Becky have input. they will have an opportunity to be heard if this is on a ballot and voters could come. I think the only thing that we need to come today, and again, it goes back to my first comment, is streamlining consensus for them to have language to bring to us on an open public meeting that we could vote on for these two issues. And I think some of the, for lack of a better term, some of the minutia, and I don't mean to call it minutia because I think these options are intense, to use your word. I think that those can be hashed out further, but the consensus of starting the timeline process of getting this on a ballot is what our city attorney needs. Would you agree with that assessment, Madam City Attorney?
Yes, and just to clarify further, in order to get this on the November 2024 ballot, which is the next available option, we would have to essentially put before you a draft ordinance probably sometime in the early part of next year between January and March for first and second reading. So that way we have time to fine tune any changes and get it before the supervisor of elections by June of 2024, which is their deadline.
There's also an interesting other issue of there will be, assuming arguendo, again, I didn't want to make this about who's running or wants to do these things. There'd be a resign to run issue if any one of us up here wanted to run for the mayor's seat. You would have to resign to run. Right? Yeah.
I'm not sure that you would necessarily have to resign to run, but what you would have to do again is you would have to, essentially you would have to forfeit your seat. So to the extent that you are selected, well, then you're mayor. And if you're not selected, well, then your seat is up.
So I say it just because it's another layered issue, but I don't want to look at this selfishly. I want to look at it. What do we want the voters to decide one way or the other? Because I think you can debate these points. We can have a 4-hour meeting on this because I think there's enough issues here, especially with some of these options. So, I mean, does anyone else have anything they want to discuss? Sandy or Jackie? Commissioner Raley.
Well, I just want to address the fact that whatever we do, doesn't matter whether we have tension up here, we always do what's best for the city. Whether we're having tension or we're having some discourse about what should be done, who agrees, who doesn't agree, we're always going to have that. Right now, we have to decide what's best for the city, who is going to do the best job for the city. And I truly feel that anyone that decides they want to run for mayor of the city of Coconut Creek can do so as long as you reside here for 12 months. So that could pose a problem with the mechanics of the commission. So we better think long and hard before we make a decision. I also want to know, because there are going to be consequences no matter what we do and whatever we decide. So I think we need to really think long and hard on this. Also, I'm confused because the list that we have in front of us that has elected mayors and appointed mayors, there are 31 cities in Broward. Okay. All right. So there are 18. Is it 18 to 13? Because that wasn't made clear in the discussions, how many are actually elected mayors and appointed mayors out of the 31.
Again, it's 18 cities have elected mayors.
So,
Sorry.
this could be, I finished the table at the 11th hour,
Okay.
just crunching everything. And so you may not have the most latest data. And honestly, I haven't gone through to look, but I can tell you that we, as the city of Coconut Creek, city of Hillsborough Beach.
Well, that leaves
Town of
13
Pembroke
cities,
Park.
right? If we're saying that 18 are elected,
No, I think it's far greater than that. Jackie.
it's far greater.
I
than
think
that.
what the numbers you're talking about,
Okay.
March versus November, there's only 3 cities, all tiny cities that still have an appointed mayor.
Okay.
I don't think you can count the village of
So-
Lazy Lake. I don't know what's going on there. I don't know if you've seen that on here.
Right.
Well, I think that's what we need to clarify.
It's close to Mount Dora.
Mayor.
Madam Brooks.
So, one of the things that you were discussing is that per our charter, you have to appoint a mayor here, and there could be tension that goes with that. So what about consideration for a charter amendment that says the mayor position shall be rotated amongst each commissioner? And that would be like the county or have the same end result. It would eliminate the voting, the internal voting that is necessary here, give everybody that opportunity to perform the mayoral rules, bringing their background and their experiences behind it and with it, as just another option.
So we don't trust the people to pick the mayor. We're going to say we're going to rotate it no matter what in this way. I don't support that. Respectfully, Karen.
The people
I
pick
appreciate
the
your-
elected officials.
Picking us,
I agree.
yeah.
I appreciate your input.
And just so that I can clarify that answer to that question, it appears that there are 4 cities in the county that still have just straight 5 elected commissioners, and the appointed mayor amongst them. I say that with a caveat because remember, Margate isn't transitioning to their elected mayor until 2028. If they're included in that list, then there's 5. And then another caveat is City of Oakland Park. While they do have an elected mayor, it's purely based on the number of votes that come through in
Dane used the same one.
previous, right? So that's sort of on the fence, if you're going to count those all as 6.
When did Margate decide to move, when did they make the decision for November 2028?
Last year in March and November, the last general election in November, Margate put it on the ballot.
So we're now making a decision after them, and we're having these decisions potentially take effect before their process even happened.
Depending which option you pick, possibly yes, possibly no.
Right. Yeah.
They deleted it. Like I looked at the chart. I mean, I analyzed a lot of the cities in transition just from my own information, right? Just looking at how cities implemented it. Margate deleted, like they had one of their commissioners volunteered to delete his district. So his seat is gone. That's how they did it a little weirdly and uniquely. And I don't love they did it differently than I think we're proposing it here. So, I mean, I guess, how do you want me to get to the next point? What, Madam City Attorney, what would you like this commission to give you consensus on?
Well, one, do you want to move forward with changing the elections from March to November?
I think it's too soon to make a decision on that.
Yeah, I'm not on board with moving it to November. I think March gives us a little bit better.
If we don't do it now, what is our next option?
And that's a great question. So the Charter Review Board is typically where these discussions can be had. That's scheduled to convene in January of 2025. Their term of discussion is for 120 days. They'll propose any changes to the charter in total to you all as the commission. Any approved items that you all desire to move forward to the voters would then go to the voters in November of 2026.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We're still on you, Commissioner Riley.
I
The
was-
question
I
didn't
was
get around the-
I was afraid you were going to say that.
Good try, Jackie.
I know. In my heart, I feel that it's the responsible thing to do is move it to November for our voters. And in my mind, I feel that it's going to get lost. We're going to get lost. And right decisions won't be made.
That's why we do have a Charter Review Board.
Yeah. So I'm talking about the voting. That the voters won't really give it the time and effort that's needed for the municipality vote. I'd say leave it in March.
Sandy?
Well, I'll just restate, I feel like we should move the elections to November.
Yep, I agree, but it fails. So at this point, the November fails. Wasserman, call the poll on mayor. Do you believe that we should put on the ballot an elected mayor?
Eventually, yes. But I still don't, like I said earlier, I think it's too soon. It's too fast. And I would like to do another workshop with some, maybe the 2-year term for mayor. And I'd like to have more information and more options for us to look into that.
Brody,
I
guess, Jeff, I guess the question is, do you want to move forward with it I mean, because the reality is if your answer is no, you're saying kill it tonight. If your answer is yes, you're saying move forward with it. Is that fair, Terrell?
Yes, and then we can certainly bring other options to you as it relates to the election mayor.
And you're not locked into anything. All that goes for all of us until it comes on the city commission agenda and you're actually voting on something.
Right.
Just because you're pushing something forward doesn't.
So is it possible to get, before I would just say yes on that, would it be possible to get more options with the 2-year mayor and maybe do another workshop prior to a commission meeting?
Certainly that's possible. I think it's really just a matter of timing. If we're going to put this on the November ballot, we have to back everything up from there. So the workshop would need to take place foreseeably before the end of the calendar year.
And can we do that?
I defer to our city manager as to the timing.
Why don't we get down the line first? Is that fair? I think we're all for more workshops and talking, but let's see.
Right. I just don't want to say yes right now and then assume that I'm all in for, one of these and we're going to put it on the ballot language that we have. I'm just not going to say yes to that.
You're not saying yes for what's been shown to you this evening.
Correct. But I'm saying yes
say
to
no.
continuing. So we're not
Say no. You don't have to say yes. I'm just telling you.
Okay. Hold on. Okay. This is big conversations. And I'd like to continue the conversation. But with these current things, I would like to see more options. I'm not dead set on one of these. I would like to see more options for a 2-year mayor that was not proposed, shown to us today. So I will say yes to continuing the dialogue on a potential mayor on the ballot as long as I can see those options at another workshop. If I can't, then I say no.
Clear as could be.
I get
Brody?
it.
I'm for putting the mayor on the ballot.
Jackie,
No.
Sandy,
No.
I'm a yes. I will say this about the November elections. I think that we need to stress the importance of the Charter Review Committee dealing with that. And I think that issue is probably appropriate to have residents addressing that first. I do. So I don't think I think the only thing that has ever been debated on charter review, just to educate my 2 new colleagues, is the elected mayor. The last time there was charter review was debated. I think it lost by charter review on a 4-1 to put it on a ballot. I think that's what it was on charter review. But so I think that the stress for whoever we appoint respectively on a charter review board should address that item first.
So just to recap, it appears that we got consensus to come back with additional options for discussing an elected mayor at a future workshop.
Yes.
Thank you.
And so, Madam Brooks, please schedule another workshop based on the consensus of the commission prior to the new year to meet whatever Terrell's requirements are.
Will do.
Now, my other question for you, just for the purposes of education, is if there's a ballot initiative on this, we have no control over any of it. Is that fair?
Well, a ballot initiative would still have to come before you as far as an ordinance. So you would have first and second reading. Ultimately, though, I mean, you have very little leeway as it relates to changing that, because that would be coming from the voters. The only thing is that obviously if it's not legally sufficient or what have you,
I agree.
then we would be able to address it that
So
way.
hypothetically, if a resident wanted to put a ballot initiative out there, this is regardless, it's the will of the people. Fair?
Generally speaking, yes.
Thank you. Does anyone have anything else?
And if the ballot initiative comes to us at first reading, it's a regular vote. Like it could not go through to second reading. Is that
Can't say no to
correct?
ballot initiative.
So I think it's essentially a formality.
Thank you. I just want to understand.
Thank you.
Is there a motion?
Motion adjourned.
We're adjourned.